When I turned 30, so many people told me your 30s are one of the best decades of your life. You're a little more sure of yourself, you have life figured out a little bit more than you did before, and overall it's just a really exciting decade for a lot of people. But part of the reason your 30s feel a little bit less overwhelming is because of all of the life lessons and experiences that you've had from all the decades prior. And when I hit this age milestone, I took a little time to reflect and think about what are some of the core things that I learned before turning 30 and how can I apply them in my life going forward. In this video, I'm going to walk you through some of the main life lessons that I learned before turning 30 and how I'm trying to apply them in my everyday life now. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. One of the first life lessons that I thought about when I was reflecting on my 20s specifically was that you should stay true to your path, not your timeline. And what I mean by this is that it is so easy to look at our peers or our friends or just random people on the internet and feel like if they are doing a certain thing or hitting a certain life milestone that we're behind if we're not hitting that same one. Some people might hit certain milestones before others, and that's totally okay. Some people may never hit those milestones, and that's also okay. It's just whatever your path is or whatever the path is that makes you feel fulfilled and happy, that's what you should be focusing on, not the exact timeline. And I think for me specifically, some of the examples there are, I know in my mid-20s, a lot of my friends and peers started to buy homes or get engaged, and I was just not at that point in my life yet. And just because their timelines weren't matching up with my timeline, it doesn't mean that one or the other is wrong. And that is something that I try to think about and just stay true to that mentality even today, because it is so easy to get caught up in that way of thinking and just comparing yourself to where you are at versus others are at a certain age. For me right now, I am in my early 30s and I still don't own a home, and that is totally fine. That is just my path. I love living in an apartment. I love living in the city, and just because other people my age are expected to or plan to buy homes, it doesn't mean that I have to do that as well. So I try to remind myself of that on a daily basis whenever I'm feeling behind. The second life lesson that I started to reflect on was to not let your past define your future. And what I mean by this is to not let a past version of you define, control, or determine the future version of you. As an example, for me personally, I had a super deliberate plan going into college. I knew that I wanted to work on Broadway. I wanted to work in casting. I had performed my whole life. My whole identity was around performing and singing and just being on stage. But as I graduated college, started working in the industry, started to feel like it didn't necessarily fit somehow. It was really hard to let that piece of me go and try and almost define a new version of myself that was actually more true to who I was at that point in time. It was just kind of almost breaking an identity, which was really, really challenging for me because that was all I knew. If you were a certain way at a certain point in time or you had a certain mentality, it doesn't mean that you always have to stick to that way or that mentality. And it's really scary to decide that you want to be somebody totally different, which I think, that kind of leads me into the third life lesson, which is that it is okay to change your mind. I think we are all going through life for the first time, and we're all going to be learning as we go. And as you grow and you gain new experiences or hear new information, sometimes those things can lead to you changing your mind about a number of different things, whether it's certain topics, whether it's a certain industry that you're working in, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship, a friendship. You can change your mind at any point in time of how you feel about something, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be you have all of your views and your life planned out when you turn 18 and that's how it's going to be for the rest of your life. Like, you're always going to be learning, and if you change your mind about something, that's totally fine and acceptable. For me personally, that has been kind of a reassuring lesson because I feel like I have changed so much as a person over the last decade, and just because I thought one thing when I was 21 doesn't mean that I feel the same way when I'm 31. The next life lesson that I really took away from my 20s specifically was try to travel. Traveling opened my eyes to so many different ways of life, and just having a totally different perspective on my own life, on the life around me, on who I want to be as a person. And this doesn't even mean, traveling to totally different countries or, spending a ton of money to go on these elaborate trips. This could even be just going to a few towns over from where you live right now and just experiencing experiencing a different way of life than you are used to. It just really opens up your eyes and gives you perspective on your own life. And I think that it allows for more acceptance. And for me personally, it's just been a very incredible experience to travel. I have totally lost track of what number I'm on, but the next life lesson that I wanted to share is that it may take a few jobs to find one that you like. I think when you first graduate high school or college and you enter the workforce whenever and wherever that is, it is so easy to once again like look at your friends or your peers and see them having the dream job that they always wanted, and you're stuck in a job that feels totally unfulfilling and not at all like what you thought it would be. And I think that's pretty normal. For me, it took me a couple of jobs to really find the one that I felt spoke to me, and that's totally okay. Again, I started off working on Broadway in casting. I then moved into working at an economic consulting firm in HR, and then I worked for a tech startup doing social media. It took a while to really figure out like what I wanted out of a job and what really fulfilled me. There's always going to be elements of a job that you don't love or elements that you wish you could change, and especially those first few jobs, it's totally normal to just not like the first couple of jobs you have and feel like you have no idea what you're doing and this doesn't feel authentic to you. And I just wish that somebody kind of told me that when I was first entering the workforce, because I feel like we have this thing over our heads that like you should go after your dream and you should love what you do, and if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And that's all great and amazing, and if people find that straight out the gate, that's awesome. But I think for a lot of us, it takes a little while to figure out what that is or what that means, and that's okay. So that is definitely a life lesson that I took away from my 20s specifically, and that even today I'm still trying to think about in my 30s. One of the harder life lessons that I have had to learn over the last few years is that relationships change, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. There are so many positive changes that can happen within your relationships as you go through life and you change yourself. But it is difficult when you have friendships or family relationships or romantic relationships that change, and it feels strange that they are not the same as they used to be. I know that a common trope that comes up around this topic is around friends that you made in middle school or when you were in preschool. And sometimes it is just natural that as you age and as you get older and you have different experiences, that you just don't have as much in common with the people that you met when you were really, really young. And it doesn't mean that your friendship ends just because there may not be as much of a connection at a certain point in time. It doesn't mean that you are losing that connection forever or that it's not going to change back. And they can always change for the better as well. I know that that happens with a lot of people and their parents. I know a lot of friends who, didn't really relate to or enjoy being around their parents when they were younger. And then as they got older, and a lot of the times when they had kids of their own and they understood a little bit more where their parents were coming from in certain situations, and it ended up bringing them closer. So I think that it's just important to keep that perspective that relationships can change. Sometimes it's for the better, sometimes it's not, but you have control over how much you want these relationships to change on your side. And at the end of the day, if certain things just aren't fitting within a relationship anymore, it's also okay to let those relationships go. The final life lesson that I just wanted to call out is how important it is to advocate for yourself. I think that I, for a very long time, depended on so many other people to advocate for me. And at the end of the day, in any situation, whether it's personal, professional, what have you, it's so important to be the person that can stick up for you. I know that this is often talked about in the context of work, but for me personally, something where I really experienced this was in the context of medicine, where I was having a really, really difficult time for a long time around a medical issue. And I really had to be the person that was making multiple appointments with a ton of different specialists and really trying to get to the bottom of the problem because nobody else was going to do that for me, unfortunately. I think that that was a really important life lesson for me, where I just took away from that experience, like, okay, at the end of the day, I need to look out for myself. And sometimes that sucks to feel like you don't have somebody that's in your corner, but other times, it can feel very empowering. And I think that that was something that was really important that I learned in my 20s. So those are a few of the life lessons that I learned before turning 30. I think it is so important to reflect on and learn from different experiences that we've had and really take lessons away away from them. I would be super interested to hear about any that you may have. Feel free to let me know in the comments below. As always, if you liked this video, definitely feel free to give it the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I hope you are all having a great day, a great week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.